you stay on this side, you stand here. All right. Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'm pleased to welcome my friend Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach to the great state of Texas. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I want to welcome Wes Verdell, who's with Gun Owners of America, and even more exciting to me right now is that he was just elected in the Republican primary in District 53. So, Wes, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We are here today because, yet again, Joe Biden is weaponizing the federal bureaucracy to destroy our Constitution and destroy our citizens' Second Amendment rights. Today, Texas is leading a multi-state coalition that is suing to stop a final rule issued by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives that would criminalize private firearm sales. Biden's latest effort to unilaterally curtail our constitutional rights is completely illegal. It is a dramatic escalation of his tyrannical abuse of authority. Throughout the years, Congress deliberately recognized the legality of private firearm sales by non-dealers. Congress even went so far as to narrow the statutory definition of dealer to prevent the ATF from unlawfully suppressing the private transfer of firearms. Joe Biden is trying to change that through regulatory redefinition, executive edict, and workarounds designed to evade our Constitution. He has completely disrespected and disregarded the democratic process. He has violated the separation of powers intended by our founding fathers to preserve the consent of the people in matters of government. On April 19th, the ATF published its new rules subjecting hundreds of thousands of law-abiding gun owners to presumption of criminal guilt for engaging in the constitutionally protected private sale of firearms. We will not let Biden continue his tyrannical abuse of power. His war on our Second Amendment rights must be stopped. Throughout our country's history, private citizens have bought and sold firearms, and their freedom to do so is guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. With today's lawsuit, it is my great honor to stand up to protect our constitutional rights from the out-of-control federal government. My message to Joe Biden yesterday, today, and forever is this: come and take it. And as some of you might know, that's from ancient Greek, but it's also from 1835, the Battle of Goliad, for the Texas independence. Thank you to our colleagues from Louisiana, Mississippi, and Utah, and thank you to Kansas and their coalition, and to our co-plaintiffs, Wes Verdell with Gun Owners of America, the Tennessee Firearms Association, and the Virginia Citizens Defense League. And now, I want to welcome my really good friend who's done an amazing job as the Attorney General of Kansas. I'm so pleased to have him in Texas, and really pleased to have him in a coalition to stop an overreaching Joe Biden who's trying to take away our Second Amendment rights. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. And I think it's kind of fitting that Kansas and Texas are leading these two coalitions of states. Our states have a long and storied history together. Indeed, the cowboy era of the 1870s and 80s was the driving of cattle from Texas to the railheads in Kansas at Dodge and Abilene and Kansas City. And that era of American history would not have been possible without the private ownership of firearms, which the cowboys carried, and the private trading of firearms, which the cowboys did among one another. So it's fitting that in defending these Second Amendment rights, Kansas and Texas stand shoulder to shoulder today. And as Attorney General Paxton mentioned, Texas is filing one lawsuit in the Northern District of Texas. Kansas is leading the other lawsuit, which we are filing this morning in the Eastern District of Arkansas. And this is so important that attorneys general stand for our Second Amendment rights. Biden's ATF has become infamous in its overreach. And what President Biden has done repeatedly is when he cannot get a bill through Congress, he does it through regulations. And so the Biden administration, as everyone in here should know, has attempted to close the so-called gun show loophole with statute, and Congress has rejected the Biden administration's statutory efforts every time. Now, President Biden is having the ATF do it through an administrative rule. And what they're doing is they're trying to redefine engaged in the business of dealing firearms. And the definition is so broad that, as Attorney General Paxton said, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of Americans will be engaged in the business of selling firearms without even knowing it. Let me give you a couple of examples. We were just on the gun range, and let's suppose that Attorney General Paxton and I are firing our favorite handguns, and then we trade, and we fire each other's gun, and I like his gun, and he likes mine. I say, hey, you want to just trade? And we trade guns. If my gun was worth $50 at the retail price more than his gun, Attorney General Paxton is guilty of a felony for making a profit in the trade of a firearm, a one-time trade where there wasn't even an exchange of cash, because he gained a quote-unquote profit from that one transaction. I can think of countless other examples. My wife thinks I have too many guns, and we have a rule. And the rule is that if I get a new gun, I have to sell one of my older guns. And I've done this at least 3 times. And according to the ATF's rule, and I have read this rule very carefully, I am engaged in restocking my collection of guns every time I sell one and purchase another, sell one and purchase another. I'm not a gun dealer. I'm just a guy who likes to hunt and likes to shoot for sport. But under this new rule, I would be a felon if this continued. So we are bringing this lawsuit for a couple of reasons. One is it's illegal. The Congress already defined what it means to be engaged in the business of dealing firearms, and occasional sales like these are not covered in the definition. So ATF is changing the statutory definition. That is illegal. They don't have that authority. Secondly, it's unconstitutional. Second Amendment protects our right to keep and bear arms, and the courts have said that you can't keep and bear arms unless you can obtain them and buy and sell them. And that is a Second Amendment claim that we will be bringing. We're also bringing a due process claim. Private litigants like this, or us individually, not as attorneys general, it's a fundamental principle of due process that you cannot have a crime that is so vague you don't know whether you're violating it or not. This definition is so vague, Americans won't know that they're violating it. So those are the 3 central claims. And lest anyone think that, well, the ATF's not going to do that. The ATF is going to be very careful about enforcing this. Well, then, if you think that, you haven't been watching the ATF over the last 3 years. Just in 2022, President Biden's ATF under Dettelbach, the director of the ATF, they announced that they were having a zero-tolerance policy. They are closing down gun shops all across America at a higher rate than at any time in the prior 15 years. Texas has had the most gun shops closed by this aggressive ATF. 11 were closed in 2022. Kansas is in second place with 8 gun shops closed, and we don't want to be in first or second place in this competition. But the bottom line is the ATF is going aggressively against gun shops for what would routinely be considered paperwork errors prior to President Biden. It would have resulted in prior to Biden, it would have been a friendly phone call from the ATF agent for the region to the gun store owner saying, hey, your paperwork's not right, could you please refile it? They would do it, issue resolved. Now, with this zero-tolerance policy, they're coming in and shutting down perfectly law-abiding gun stores, and they're going to take the same attitude with this new regulation, which is why we are suing to stop it, and we intend to obtain a preliminary injunction if the judges agree, and stop this from going into effect.
Thank you. It's really a shame that General Kobach has no passion for this issue.
Yeah.
So Wes, I didn't tell you about this, but if you want to say a few words, we'd love for you to address the...
So I'm Wes Verdell with Gun Owners of America. I am the Texas State Director for GOA. We are extremely grateful to be standing here right now with the General. General has, over the years, has done some amazing work in the Second Amendment sector for us. We really appreciate what you've done. We actually have a hearing today in the Fifth Circuit that you filed, Paxton versus Dettelbach, and we're looking really forward to see the result of that. We are facing an ATF that is targeting FFL holders and gun owners. I go around the state. This is my job. I travel around the state talking to FFL dealers. Many of them are aggravated at what has happened to them. They've had the ATF weaponized against them in many ways. Normally, ATF would come in and do a real simple search, look through their paperwork, make sure that everything's good. If there was something that they had mistakenly done, they would correct it and move on. Now the ATF is going in looking for any mistake they have as an excuse to take away their FFL. We have FFLs, gunsmiths that we've talked to are extremely frustrated, and the ATF continues to put pressure onto law-abiding citizens. We have a Second Amendment. It's guaranteed to us in the Constitution. That Second Amendment is a restriction on the government. It's not a restriction on the people, and it's not a right for for the ATF to come after citizens, what they're doing. Me and my friends, we shoot all the time. We trade guns, just like was talked about. Anyways, it's a thing where it's normal for us to maybe sell a gun, and often I'm kind of limited to how many guns I'm allowed to possess currently in my household. And so a lot of times I will sell a firearm so I can go buy another one. I shouldn't have to become an FFL to do that, or I also shouldn't have to become a felon or somebody who's doing something illegal for doing a right that was already guaranteed to me and a law that was already guaranteed to allow me to do that. So we're extremely grateful at Gun Owners of America to be standing up here with both of y'all. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the fight that y'all have done. Ken Paxton has been, no offense, but as an Attorney General from a Texas perspective, Ken Paxton has been leading the charge on fighting for your Second Amendment rights, and we really are blessed to have you as an Attorney General. So appreciate the time, and thanks for letting me be here with you.
Oh, absolutely. So glad to have Gun Owners of America here. They do an amazing job, and really congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions about our lawsuit?
So there are the examples that you guys talk about, like the traders, but there are probably some examples where people sell a lot of guns on, outside of the professional store here. Is there a middle ground that exists on this issue, and the Biden administration just went too far, or what's your thoughts?
So if there's a middle ground, it should be controlled by Congress. The ATF, as far as I know, is not in the Constitution. I haven't found it anywhere in the Constitution. And so there's a process. It's called elected representatives. They make the changes. It's not up to Joe Biden to just issue an edict through the ATF that controls the sale of guns. If there needs to be a change, that needs to be addressed by Congress. You want to say anything else?
Yeah, I mean, Attorney General Paxton is exactly right. Congress makes the definitions. And I think the existing definitions are just fine. They were made in 1986 with the Gun Owners Protection Act, and then in 2022 with the Bipartisan Gun Control Act. I can't remember the exact name of it. But in 86 and 22, the definitions were made. They wrote the definition in 86, or they redefined it, and then they made a slight tweak in 2022. And basically, the way federal statute works is, a gun store is a gun store if they are engaged in repetitive, engaged in the business is the phrase. They are engaged in the business of dealing firearms through repetitive transactions, indicating that they are doing business. And the definition in federal law excludes occasional sales between citizens or persons, actually, for restocking your collection or for liquidating a collection, or the occasional sales are expressly excluded. And this regulation would basically change the definition. ATF can't do that. Only Congress can.
Well, in Congress, I mean, they specifically went after this issue to protect exactly the type of transactions that these guys do.
Do you see this going to the Supreme Court?
I would say that if we lost at the Fifth Circuit, which I don't think we will, that we would appeal. And my guess is if they lost at the Fifth Circuit, they being the Biden administration and ATF, that they would appeal. Whether the Supreme Court takes it, I don't know.
I think you're on solid legal ground.
Yeah, I know we're on solid legal ground. I know that if the Constitution means anything, if federal law means anything, we're going to win this.
Can I ask you about another topic?
Actually, I'd rather just keep to this topic. I'd rather talk about that later. I'd rather keep it to one topic, if that's okay. Just because these guys came down for this topic. Yes?
Are you against background checks for private gun sales?
So this lawsuit has nothing to do with background checks. It's a whole nother issue. And we're not really here to talk about background checks. We're here to talk about this particular lawsuit.
I would say this, though. Because of this rule, the way it works is, under this new rule, if Ken and I were to trade guns, one of us would have to get an FFL. We'd have to pay $200 and have ATF issue a license so that one of us is now a dealer. And then for us to do our trade, we would have, the one who's a dealer would have to do background checks. So the background check is part of the burden that is placed on ordinary Americans.
And again, Congress specifically protected us from that. And the ATF has said, we don't care what the elected representatives want, and Joe Biden has said the same thing. That's the problem we have.
There's currently legislation before Congress to abolish the ATF. Lawsuits like the ones you're bringing now, the current
Look, it certainly would have resolved our problem. We wouldn't be suing if the ATF weren't doing this. I think we've got this problem with federal agencies across the board. I can't think of one that really takes care of the people anymore. I'd love to see a lot of agencies go away and at least start over. And ATF is certainly on the list that I would have to start over. I don't know if you...
Yeah, I would agree with what Attorney General Paxton just said. This isn't the only agency that has engaged in administrative overreach and gone beyond what the law allows. Excuse me. But the ATF has been particularly egregious. In fact, that 1986 act I was talking about was in response to the ATF in the 1970s and early 1980s, going completely beyond its authority and going after gun stores and gun owners. And so the ATF is particularly bad, but to your specific question, I think if they just abolished it and then put that authority into another agency, depending on who the president is, that other agency could be just as bad.
I think Wes Verdell has an opinion on this.
Yeah, appreciate that. So if you do a real simple Google search, just look up ATF raids, you will see that they are completely abusing the way that their agency is supposed to operate, in my opinion. They're showing up for law-abiding citizens that have families, showing up at their houses, fully kitted out with their machine guns and everything else, face mask on, to intimidate the citizens. That's the whole purpose of it. They want it on video. They want the Americans to be afraid of that. If they had operated within a boundary that would have been respectful, a lot of this stuff wouldn't even be occurring at the moment. But I do think that I'm going to say the ATF, I believe, is an unconstitutional organization, and I'm going to say that the way that they have behaved shows exactly why they shouldn't be existing right now. If you basically took them away, we wouldn't have this problem just as stated. And so therefore, the ATF's behavior has been unbecoming of the way that an agency that does what they're supposed to should behave or should be operating. And therefore, I think their actions now have resulted in many citizens across the United States very unhappy with their agency.
Let me add to that. One of the examples that he was referring to just occurred very recently, and you might have been referring to the Arkansas case. The director of the Little Rock Airport, if I remember his position correctly, this, upstanding, law-abiding citizen, his home was raided by the ATF in the early hours of the morning. This is very recent. You can Google it. And it resulted in shots being exchanged, presumably, like most people defending their family in a home, if they get a knock on the door before dawn, they may be inclined to carry a gun. And he was shot and killed. This director of the airport was shot and killed by ATF agents just recently. And so that just shows you the attitude of the agency. And oh, by the way, apparently there were no vest cams, or at least no footage has been available, and members of Congress have demanded it, including Senator Tom Cotton. And so no evidence to indicate just exactly what the ATF did. This is an agency that has been really going across the line again and again. And for them to pass this regulation now, we fear it's going to be Katie bar the door with what they try to do next.
Did I hear you correctly that if this was just a background check rule, this maybe not a part of the lawsuit, but it's the licensing and the other rules that kind of come with it? That's why the pushback is. If it was just background checks, voluntary or anything.
Here's what I'm going to say. If ATF does not have the right to issue these regulations, whatever they are, backgrounds, it doesn't matter. We would sue them because it's not their job to go beyond what Congress has allowed. If they're doing what Congress has directed them to do, that's fine. If they're going beyond that, which they are every single day, we're going to sue them, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. By the way, I want to thank the gun range, Frisco Gun Range Club, for hosting this and letting us do this here. Any other questions? Maybe a couple more?
Any thoughts on the schedule change from marijuana provision?
Honestly, I'd like to keep it to this topic.
Excuse me. So do you believe that the federal government's decision to enact new laws through administrative rule, as opposed to going through Congress and asking Congress to pass new laws, do you believe that that's a statement on electoral support or a lack for these new laws?
Go ahead.
I think it's a statement of the fact that Biden has been unable to get these bills through Congress. Some of you may remember in 2019, I can't remember the name of it exactly, but it was a bill to basically bring universal background checks to the country for private sales of firearms, and it passed the House, which was controlled by Democrats. It did not pass the Senate. The current administration and their allies in Congress have tried to get things through. and they have failed. And if they had gotten them through, then we wouldn't be standing here unless that law violated the Second Amendment in some way. But an agency cannot do what Congress has the power to do. The Supreme Court has said in recent years, it's called the major questions doctrine. If an agency tries to answer a major question, like who is a dealer in firearms, who has to have an FFL, they are intruding upon Congress's authority. An executive agency can't do that. Only our elected representatives can do that.
And look, this sort of behavior started under President Obama, where anything that they couldn't pass, and of course, you know, Obama lost his majority after 2 years. So this is a strategy. We just write the laws. We don't need Congress. Let's make the states stop us. And they do all kinds of things, not just ATF, but EPA, name an agency, and this is the strategy. We don't need the people. We make the rules. Let me do maybe one or two more questions. Well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Expected timeline?
What's that?
Any expected timeline? What's the next step? Are these already filed?
They were filed this morning.
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, both of them were filed this morning.
And in both cases, the states will be asking for a preliminary injunction.
Yep.
Roughly how long is that?
Depends on the judge. The motions for a preliminary injunction will probably be filed this week, and a judge who wants to move quickly could make a decision within a month. A judge who doesn't want to move quickly.
And I'll just say, from just a competitive standpoint, we're going to try to beat them. So. No, we really appreciate y'all coming. Thank you.